Hi guys and welcome to the Hobby Hacker. In this vid we're going to be going over sort of the basic principles of sculpting a head. I'm going to be doing this all in VR, but as I say, these are basic principles, so they'll transfer across to pretty much any sculpting suite you like. Right, I've pulled in a stamp in this case, but that's basically a simple base mesh. This saves you all the initial aggravation and heartache of making your own base mesh for something that you're going to change anyway. So I've hollowed out the eyes and I've put in a sphere into each eyeball on a separate layer, just so that my sculpting around the eyeballs doesn't squish in and moosh up with the eyeball itself. It's a nice clean definition from one part to the other. And as you can see, I'm going around with the move tool. I'm just sort of tweaking it here and there. I'm going in with the smooth tool and just rounding out any sort of sharp edges, because let's face it, it looks like Crichton from Red Dwarf. You know, it's not the smoothest of base meshes you've ever seen. So I'm just working around the model, you know, having a good look. I'm not working from a reference here, but which, you know, it's never a good idea if you're trying to achieve a specific look. But because I've got, you know, this base mesh that I'm working from, I know all the proportions are right, so I'm just letting my imagination flow a little bit and see where we end up. So I've extended out the shoulders down to the chest a little bit, just so I can start putting in some proper definition of the muscle, like the sternomastoid across the neck, the Adam's apple on what we'll get in there. So I've just added a little more geometry down the bottom for me to play with. There goes in the mastoid and it's getting all smoothed out. So I'm sort of roughly drawing these muscle structures in and then going back over with the smooth brush to blend it all in. Now, these are basic shapes. I'm not going for anything exacting or defined here. I'm just rattling around the model, putting in these basic muscle groups that I want to sort of highlight and stand out. Get a better strengthening of the jaw. It's about this point in the sculpt that I'm getting a feel for where I'm going, and I'm wanting that whole captain of the guard in his space marine armor kind of look. So he's going to have a bald head, big strong jaw, overly sized sort of forehead thing going on, just because that's sort of the mood I was in. That captured me imagination as I was sculpting. Now, a thing to note if you're sculpting to print is a lot of these features need to be almost cartoonesque in how pronounced you make them, because if they're not, or if your detail is too small, the problem isn't that it won't print, it's that it will try and print and it just gives you a mushy kind of not crisp finish. Whereas less detail but more exaggerated at that 28mm scale will give you what appears to be crisper, sharper detail. I mean, it's taken me a while to really wrap my head around it, and I'm only just getting there now. But when you're looking at your sculpt in the first place, if it looks realistic, it's too much, wind it back. And if it looks dead cartoony, then you're on the right track. Now, I've just drawn in the upper eyelid on a brand new layer here, and then I've drawn in the bottom eyelid on yet another new layer. Now, that means I can manipulate and move these eyelids about independent of each other and independent of the face, so I can get the lay around the eyes correct without worrying that my move tool is going to start moving cheekbones and half the nose out the way and stuff like that. And then in a little while you'll see me drop in that little sort of ball that goes at each end of the eye. Now, that is too small to print, and I was just lost in my own little place enjoying it, and that's why that ended up in there. For the final to the printer version, that would have to come out for what I've said before, it would just moosh up the detail that is there. You see me just perfecting the eye shape, and then new layer, chuck in that dot, and it looks lovely. But it's so easy to forget when you're looking, especially in VR, you're looking at this head that's larger than life size. You forget how little of that detail is actually going to come out. But other than working around the eyes, we're still going for basic shapes across the whole head. Now, I'm slamming in these wrinkles really hard, and I like doing that, really, really carving them in and then smoothing them out with the smooth brush, because you don't always want to leave the wrinkle, but you want to leave the sort of idea of the shape of the wrinkle behind. Especially true from where it comes from the top of the nose down, sort of past the jowls. You'll see me carve that in and smooth it out several times, because that just, it builds up the idea of that muscle underneath without having to physically full on draw it in. I'm just working on putting a little bit of texture on those lips. Again, not going overkill here, because a lot of this, if I went for super detail, it wouldn't even begin to print. But I've noticed, the odd little sort of deeper line across the lips does tend to come out. Okay, just working around the face a little more, smoothing out lines. I'm just drawing in ridges for where the eyebrows sort of live. Now, they really, if you want the brush to pick up on those, they do need to be like really exaggerated, like Frankenstein levels of big brow. And sometimes it gives a very serious, sinister look. Sometimes it's just better not to have an area for the eyebrow at all. Sometimes it's just much more sensible to avoid it, because it just confuses what you're looking at. But something like a very sinister sort of guy like I've got going on here, and I don't mean sinister evil, I mean sinister like he's in charge, he's the captain. That furrowed brow's quite a good look to have. So yeah, gone for the eyebrows on this one. A little bit of work on the ear, just making sure it definitely stands off of the side of the head. A little bit of detail inside, just enough to pick up on some washes or a touch of dry brushing over the top. Any more detail than that is just wasted. Now, I'm trying to actually pull the ear out a little bit from the head here, because I just thought sticking out a little more, and I sort of gave up because it wasn't working. But I could have chopped the ear off, pulled it out, and then re-sculpted it in, but I really wasn't ready for that sort of in-depth amount of work. So I've just left it as it is and just refined some of that detail deeper, just to pick up on that dry brushing a little better. So I'm just tinkering around now, chucking in some wrinkles, smoothing them down, chucking in a few more, smoothing them down. And again, going back to what I was saying about exaggerating detail, I'm really pulling out those bags under his eyes, because if I don't, they'll not be an obvious feature of the face. Just throwing in a little bit of spine there. Nothing too crazy, just some spheres getting smaller and smaller as they go up. And I'm just having a play about with the head here. Just see if I can just change the shape a little tiny bit. Now, whilst I want that big, kind of proud forehead kind of look, and miniature heads need to be bigger than they're supposed to be, or they look out of scale when they're printed, I just wanted to pull it down a little tiny bit, but it proves awkward. There's totally loads of ways of doing it, but for the mood I was in and the quick level of sculpting that I was doing, I didn't bother and I moved on. I'm just having a tidy up around what is essentially the base of the bust, even though it's not an actual bust. Yeah, this is just a head for later use. So we're just having a quick tidy up. I've pretty much arrived at the end of the sculpt by this point, and I've kept this little lighting section in just because it's kind of cool. I like getting that nice sort of final look at a picture. Something I can chuck on my phone and have a look at when I'm not at the PC. And yeah, a lot of the time this is where I get it. Mediums cameras, they're not great. I mean, if you've made it this far through the video, you've probably half got used to that very strange 50mm camera kind of lens thing that's going on. But nevertheless, it gives a good enough sort of final result. I think it's worth noting as well, because we're just coming up on the 13-minute mark. I've played this back to you at 2 times speed, so that's taken 26 minutes from that initial stamp of a human head to this reasonably finished and pretty much print ready mini head. Yeah, that's the reason why I do this in VR, because it's so fast. Now, the same thing, I could totally achieve it in ZBrush. I could totally achieve it in Blender with the sculpt mode, and each have their benefits over and above VR. But the one thing VR has going for it now, whilst you can get top quality results out of it, you can get them 3, 4, 5 times faster than a traditional sort of sitting at your computer style sculpting setup. I've never used anything as fast as this in my life. It's crackers. So there's our finished turntable. Pretty cool. I've also included a couple of Blender renders done with Cycles Render just after this little turntable. One grayscale and one that I painted in medium and then just rendered with the vertex colors showing, just so you can sort of get an idea of what's possible. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. Hope this was a little bit useful.